MEPHUX. I'm going to go over the game you sent. This is between two players of approximate 1,200 rating on chess.com, and the person who sent me this was playing as white, and I'm going to send you an invite to the analysis board. I did that just now. There you are. Okay. MEPHUX. Okay, he's letting me know how I should have pronounced that. MEPHUX. Okay, this is MEPHUX's game. What are some things that stand out to me from this one? So just a heads up, I've invited MEPHUX into the analysis board here, and maybe along the way he will point out a thing or two regarding the thoughts he had. Maybe there was a certain, I don't know, whatever. Maybe he had certain anxiety in certain positions. Maybe he was nervous about certain moves or fearful of what might happen. I don't know what to expect, really, if anything at all. But just skimming through this, again, only devoting about 5 or 10 minutes to it. This is interesting. I've actually, on a fairly recent note, looked into this line with the computer. I've looked at the moves queen a5 and queen to d6. Queen d6 and a6 pretty much go hand in hand. To rule out knight b5 to secure the queen position, but notice how g3 is allowing for an eventual bishop f4 with tempo, and just trying to get both bishops on these adjacent diagonals, so it can't be so bad. And also with a6, this is sometimes permitting b5, but you can pretty much rule that out if the bishop's going to be on this diagonal. So this may very well be some idea black has to fianchetto the queen bishop, but if this bishop's already on g2, black can forget about this type of deployment of the bishop. So let's see, following up we have that, and that's already a mistake. Right? Okay, that's a one pawn, and that's a very significant pawn. You rip the heart out of that queenside structure. So already what I'm thinking about, to be perfectly honest, is how exactly to win this game. Because this rook is having a tough day at the office. You're up a pawn. These two pawns are split. And look at these guys. They're having a blast over here on the king side, right? They are having a blast. Right? So, okay, coming back home, no problem here. This I probably have a problem with. This move right here, I'm filing under the unnecessary category. If you're up a pawn, I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying that my initial first move is to throw a knight on f6. I'm also thinking, from my experience with looking at games with the computer, if your king knight is still in his home square, one of the top moves is almost always knight to f3, and the reason being, it's usually a pretty good move. And this is no exception. I think you should just throw your knight out and get castled, throw your rook on e1, and complete development. Okay? Again, not to say that this is bad, but you got all you need right now is to complete development. Maybe I'm stating it too simplistically. You don't need to do you don't need to make any pawn break here. Something as straightforward as development of the knight, castles, rook to e1, maybe in that very order. Notice I'm not giving much attention to the bishop on c1 because I don't know where it belongs. This seems quite appealing, development with tempo. This also seems appealing, putting pressure on the knight. I don't know where he belongs. I do know where this knight belongs, f3. I do know where my king belongs, on g1 and castled. I do know where my rook belongs, on e1 on a half-open file. So I'm going to make the moves, in other words, that I have the least amount of flexibility with. Okay, so knight f3 is what I'm referring to. Knight f3, castles, rook e1, maybe bishop here. This rook might one day be trapped. He currently can't move, so one might question why not here immediately. Well, there is that move to interfere with it, and then the rook has some new possibilities. So this could be a move, but I like knight f3. Okay, f4 it was instead. All right, he took. You're able to defend, or I'm sorry, recapture and defend. One other note: when you move this pawn, keep in mind a couple things that are happening. One, you are weakening your eventual kingside position by way of this diagonal towards your king, and you are weakening your second rank. Two things happen when you have a kingside fianchetto structure. If black has a kingside fianchetto structure, if this f-pawn moves even a single square, you are subjecting your king to pressure on both diagonal and second rank from whatever player's perspective. Second rank for white, seventh rank for black. So, okay, there shouldn't be a need to get this pawn involved. But I see the idea. I see the idea is to eliminate this guy so the bishop can come out, and boom, we're throwing a punch at the queen. So that's nice how it turned out. Pawn takes, bishop takes, throwing a punch at the queen. She has to run away scared. Knight to e2. I'm still liking knight to f3. Yeah, notice how this queen is being a pest now. Development isn't as smooth all of a sudden. Maybe as white you're anticipating after knight to e2, well, one day you don't want to have to deal with rook playing here with check. This is now a completely open file. Things are maybe a little bit scary. Maybe I start to wonder, well, should you be going in this direction? Because I'm not liking this pressure on the dark diagonal. I also don't like the idea of a knight jumping into g4, so this is scary for me. Also, another thing, if knight f3, notice how you can next play queen e2 with check, right? Notice what you did with the bishop. What did you do? You developed with tempo. That's great. What about doing the same with the queen? Queen to e2 with check, and what's that doing? Facilitating queenside castling. Okay, you could go in that direction. All right, so this is a reason if we are at this very point to consider knight f3 and then queen to e2. Black might try something clever like, well, no, I was going to say after knight to f3, this pawn push ready to meet queen e2 with rook here, but that's not going to be a good idea. Knight f3 pawn push would be dropping the knight. Okay, in today it was knight to e2. Bishop d6, queen d2, I like it. I like that move, going forward with development, securing that point. Black castles, you take, queen takes, offering a queen trade. Oh, I love this position right now. Queens are off the board, that's why. And you're up a pawn. And you're fully developed. But let me go back one step here. I think maybe I'm being too picky here. I think I like king to d2 better than to castle. It's a different story if queenside castle comes and your rook is on a half open or open file. Not the case here. So you'll still need to make another rook move. Queenside castling isn't bad, of course, but for some reason I don't like the idea of even pinning one of my pieces for even a second, even a half, even for just one moment in time, one position on the board. I'm liking king to d2, but there's not going to be a way to exploit this. Just a matter of preference. And you know what, maybe, when you compare the two squares, c1 or d2, where would you rather have the king since it's an endgame? Probably d2. One step closer towards the center. Now, this really isn't going to matter at the end of the day, but you still want to be as precise as possible along the way. You're up that pawn, and it's a very significant one. On top of that, if we look at both pawn structures, yours is perfect. Two healthy pawn islands, a group of 4, a group of 2, no weaknesses. Meanwhile, there's 2 isolated pawns here that can be picked off. You could try to target them. As a result of these isolated pawns, there now exist good homes for your pieces. When I see isolated pawns, I think about the squares in front of them, these two, these two are the ideal ones. You could throw a knight in the center, his ideal environment, and he can't be kicked away with a black knight, or it's certainly not going to be the bishop. The rook would be hard-pressed to even try and attack a knight on d4, so this is going to be a wonderful outpost because of the weaknesses in the black position. All right, moving forward, you queenside castle, you get out of the pin and you defend the knight. This pawn gets rolling, h3. I don't have anything wrong with h3. My first thought, to be honest, was to immediately throw the knight into d4. This will do two things. One, get your knight to a better position, and two, stop black from developing its last piece. But certainly h3 is not a bad idea. d4 is a bad idea, because you could have done what? Gone to this square. You could just grab that pawn. Okay, but I guess that was missed. Knight d4 instead. You could scoop up this pawn. Yeah. Okay, so instead it was knight e4, takes, rook there. Piling up a bunch of trades, no problems here. How to convert this endgame, how to make it as simple as possible. Let's see. I don't like that as a start. How can we make this as simple as possible? You know what I'd really like to have happen? If you could somehow get your bishop here. Could you manage that? Now, of course, this knight's going to move, but just assuming for a moment if the bishop was on c4, my first move would be bishop here. This knight is dead. And I then view this endgame position as strictly king and pawn endgame. There's not even, in my eyes, minor pieces on the board. You can't make that happen right here, but nevertheless, it's something to maybe try to, a position to shoot for one day, to dominate the knight. If he's ever on the edge, if he's ever on the edge, and he's on an opposite color, that of your bishop, there's a way to potentially completely dominate the knight. Okay, instead, it was g4 here. Instead of g4, I like c3. Preparing to get your king involved in this direction. c3 takes. You have two connected passed pawns. King up, maybe hunt this pawn down, or maybe immediately start pushing your pawns. The only thing you really have to be concerned about or cautious of is how you proceed when pushing your passed pawns, because you are going to have passed pawns in a very short time from now. Once you start pushing your pawns, make sure that as you push them, you are keeping control over dark squares. One thing that you would not want to have happen is for black to set up a dark square blockade and have your pawns frozen and in a position where they lack the ability to continue moving forward to promotion. Okay, we didn't have... I made that move just as a mistake. But g4 instead. b3, okay, this is opening up. You need to get that king working. Does he get working? He's going in this direction. Knight there. Okay, finally we have c3. So this isn't the most accurate, but it's still going to be sufficient. And this knight, I guarantee he hates something right now. He hates having to even think about stopping a passed pawn that is a rook pawn. So this is big trouble for black. Let's see how it's converted. Well, this is game over. King and pawn endgame is just absolutely game over. It's absolutely game over. Any issues? Okay, your king takes a hike in this direction, and that's it. Game over. There's not going to be any issue. If you really wanted to, one thing that you could do, since these pawns right here are disjointed, since they're a knight's move away from one another, here's one trick that's available to you. You could play here. The way you did it is fine, just to say, okay, I'm going to give up my pawn. I'm going to go hunt down your pawns. But you could play here. Check, king here, here. And now what does black do? If he goes here, you go here. And now he has to move this pawn. And when he moves it here, you don't take, because that's stalemate. You just push, and you give mate. So that's just another fancy way you could have ended, but the way you did it is perfectly fine. And in fact, the way there's no calculation, maybe no calculation either way, but I guess just a matter of taste at that point. But you had your choices. All right, I'm not sure what else to really even point out with this game. It was a sad story, really, as soon as he developed his bishop. He's got to do something different here, clearly. Knight c6, and only then bring the bishop out in e6. So, okay, he's saying, thank you very much. All right, you are welcome. All right, let me close out of that. Yeah, it's really downhill. Can't give up a pawn like that. And additionally, this is my biggest nitpick, I guess, f4. Knight f3, castle, rook e1. You're done with making pawn moves. They're not needed. Okay. Oh, maybe one other thing. Black probably could have been a bigger pest. After you took here, instead of taking with the queen, she really wants to stay on this diagonal. Black could have been more annoying by taking like this. Keeping the queen on this diagonal. And now there's thoughts of knight here, here, or here. That's annoying. Can't castle kingside, and if you go queenside, notice we're in a position now where we're opposite sides castled. This is something you probably don't want, because you're up a pawn, and why would you want to, let's say, create any more imbalances, create any more complications than necessary? Let's keep things balanced. You're going to go kingside? I'm going to castle kingside. You can't, it's not so easily accomplished in this position. So, this is all touching on the technique in chess, right? How to convert positions that are clearly better for one side. How to make it as the least complicated as possible. This is still going to get quite annoying, I think, at least. Maybe one day there could be pressure on these files towards your king. It's certainly a little bit tricky, but after this capture and queen takes, well, life is so much more difficult, and I don't know why Black didn't do something about avoiding the queen exchange. Exchanging down when you're up material, this is just all good. And you never lost. I think you were simply always better as soon as the queens were off. As soon as the queens were off, I don't think you ever let it slip. However, if there was a different decision made here by Black to capture on d6 with the pawn, this is a different story. It's not as clear to me. Okay. I think I really mean it this time when I say that I don't really have anything more to add. And that went more than 10 minutes. But, okay. Hopefully there was still a thing or two to take away from that.